I was always interested in gardening. Our family always had a big garden. I grew up in Moon Township when it was still farming over there. A neighbor gave me, way back in 1958, a neighbor gave me an issue of Organic Gardening magazine. And it just made sense to me from the beginning. And I started reading up on it. Of course, we had a couple acres there where I grew up. Started growing a little more there. And then, I went into the Army for a couple years, and I was in school also for a couple years. And then when I got married in 1970, we decided we both would like to have a farm, but it was really hard to buy any land. But we finally got a house, and then the value of the house went up enough that we could get a down payment on a farm. So in 1981, we bought this farm. We almost bought another one in Darlington. It was much smaller, but in the end we were glad we got this one. And we both were interested in doing it without chemicals, which at that time was even harder than now. There's a lot more equipment and different non-chemical methods available now than there was then. But we started going to farmers markets in the middle 80s, and we had our sign up organic. At that time, hardly anybody seemed to know what organic was. And
can you explain to me exactly what organic is?
Organic is growing, you might say a sustainable way that you're putting into the ground maybe more than you're taking out. It's good to have a crop in between, like a grass crop that you can plow in, and we bought a composted fertilizer. It's pretty complicated to make good compost on a small scale. So usually people buy pre-dried and composted fertilizer.
So then you would mix it into your soil?
Yeah, we just spread it on the rows where we would plant.
But some people use manure. Is that?
That's it. Ours is made from chicken manure.
Okay.
But it has a lot of minerals added to it.
I see.
And another thing called humates is added to it. That's part of the humus, part of the soil. And we also use liquid fish that we sprayed on the ground sometimes, or spray on the leaves, and seaweed. Seaweed is also in the fertilizer, but we add more. You can buy it in liquid form or powder form.
So you really prepare the soil quite well.
Yes. Okay. And then after the crop is growing, you can spray the leaves, what they call foliar feeding. And the leaves can, if you do it in the early morning or the late evening, the leaves can take up the substances from the seaweed and the fish and help to feed the plant and make it grow better and make it more resistant to insects.
Mm-hmm. Interesting. So insects don't attack the plant with
as much. I mean, insects, on certain crops, insects can be a problem, but we didn't have, except on something like cantaloupe, we didn't have that much trouble with insects. Mm-hmm. There's if you're growing cold type crops like cabbage and broccoli, you have to, every week or two, you need to spray them with a product called BT, Bacillus thuringiensis, and that will kill the little worms that get onto the cabbage and broccoli type plants.
I see. They're the little green worms that I see. Okay, I'm familiar with those.
It takes care of them completely, and it's totally non-poisonous.
Mm-hmm.
It does a real good job.
So now what type of seeds do you use? Do you start your plants from seed, or do you order your plants in?
We grew almost all our plants from seed. We had one crop that's not usually grown that much around here, which was seedless watermelon. It was pretty new at that time, and it could be a little tricky, but the insects didn't go after it too much. It was more animals. We had to fend off the deer. They would come in and smash a few. They like to eat them. And then the turkeys came for a while. They didn't eat them. They just put a hole in each watermelon so it would rot.
Is that right? Why
Yeah.
would they want to do that, do you suppose?
I don't know. I sure wish somebody would tell me.
Yeah, so it kind of ruined your crop for the year then, those doggone turkeys.
Yeah, we would put up what they call flash tape, the plastic tape that has a bright silver and red color on it, and you string it up between posts and the wind blows it, and it just flashes, and it seemed to scare them off some.
Yeah, so you do have trouble with animals.
Yeah.
Do you put a fence up around your garden at all to protect it?
No,
No?
it was just be too much. To keep deer out, you need at least an 8-foot fence and probably more like 10 foot.
I see.
We had a little sound system that was portable, ran off a car battery, and it had 4 speakers around the field, and it was dogs barking, and they would hear it from different locations. It wasn't perfect, but it seemed to help keep deer away a little bit.
That's interesting. Okay.
And then, of course, when the Game Commission offered a new type of hunting season called red tag, it was for farmers that had deer damage. We've been signed up for that for years, and that gave a longer hunting season, and that helped take down the number of deer somewhat.
So your seed now, going back to your seed, is there a specific type of a seed that you order in a catalog, or do you grow from year to year? Do you save seeds from certain plants?
No, we didn't save any. Like the seedless watermelon, you can't save it. There's no, it's actually hand pollinated. They usually produce most of the seed in South America.
Oh.
And it's very labor intensive. The seeds have gone up quite a bit in price. Right at that time, they were costing 10 to 20 or 25 cents a seed. Now sometimes you can pay up to 50 cents a seed.
Oh my goodness.
And so you certainly want to have a lot of the seed grow.
Oh,
and you
yes,
have to,
absolutely.
Seedless, you have to start inside to give it a good chance to get strong enough.
Okay.
So then we had a planter that would plant either into bare ground or plastic. We actually have a plastic layer that would make a raised bed and lay a piece of plastic over it, and underneath that plastic at the same time it put a plastic drip tube so that you could water the whole length of the row whenever you needed it.
Interesting, interesting. So I never thought about watering, but you water periodically then your crop?
Yeah, whenever, pretty much almost every week unless it rained a lot. But yeah, we started out trying sprinklers, but it was so labor intensive to move the sprinklers around that within a couple years we went to these plastic drip tubes. You just use them 1 year and then you have to discard them.
I see, I see.
And the plastic also would cause more heat. It's black plastic, and there would be more heat for the plants too. Watermelon like heat.
So that's why they do really well if it's stony, in a stony area, because the stones absorb the heat, do you suppose? Have you heard that?
It could,
Yes.
yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, some people use stone in that way, but of course, if you have a lot of stone, it makes it hard to work the ground too.
That's true. That's true.
We have one field here near the house here that's just full of stone, but
Did you find any Indian arrowheads by any chance?
I haven't found much in the past. They've found a lot in this valley.
They have,
But-
yes.
But they were found mostly when they were using moldboard plows. And they would plow, and then usually there'd be a rain before they get around to disking it. And the rain would then wash the dirt off of the arrowheads, and you could walk along and see them. Now with chisel plowing, they basically just get covered up. You really don't have much of a chance. We did have somebody out here once from the Carnegie Museum, and the woman walked along our rows, and she had a good eye for it. She picked up all kinds of little pieces of flint. So there was definitely activity.
Here, yes, yes. So tell me, you chose organic crops over the crops because of the spraying on the other crops. The other farmers would spray and pesticides that they used. So you just believed that it was more nutrient rich vegetables?
Yeah, for years they didn't see much difference between organic and regular agriculture. But there's been a number of universities that have done tests now. The vitamin content doesn't change much, but the real difference is in minerals. Our food in this country now has become very low in minerals, and the body needs a lot of different minerals. And that's one thing that the organic fertilizers have a lot of minerals in them, and when you spray seaweed and fish, seaweed has basically every mineral known except the radioactive ones. So you're really getting a lot of minerals when you use seaweed. And the fertilizer, like I said, has seaweed added to it also.
Now, in your opinion, does the food taste better? Organic food taste better?
In some cases, you can tell a definite difference. Watermelon was one, where if you buy a watermelon in the supermarket, usually it'll test about 8% sugar, maybe 7 even, where ours usually tested towards 12%. And that makes quite a difference in the flavor.
Yes.
And that means you're getting more minerals too, because it takes minerals to make sugar.
It takes minerals to make sugar. Well, you taught me something. I didn't know that. Interesting.
So that, when we started selling watermelon, once people got a taste of it, they were always coming back for more. I mean, we could sell a truckload of watermelon at the Ambridge Farm Market in 2 or 3 hours.
Where all did you go? What farm markets did you like to peddle to?
We were Ambridge for almost 20 years, and Beaver for maybe 15 years. We also sold sometimes at the Moon Township Farm Market and Coraopolis Farm Market. But in the last few years, though, that we did it, which was the early 2000s, we took almost everything to Pittsburgh. We sold it to the East End Co-op, which is a pretty small store, but they took some. And most of it went to Whole Foods Market, which most people have heard of. Whole Foods just moved into Pittsburgh in the very late 90s. And, they sell organic and regular produce, but they always mark which is organic. And, they pay a good price if you give them a good product.
Exactly.
In some cases, the wholesale price was even better than we could get at the farmer's market.
So you have a love for farming, do you?
Yes. I also had 2 uncles that had farms in Moon Township. And I was always around something going on in farming. And both of those farms are now owned by the airport, where they have the development at the edge of it.
Oh.
They're not
Yes.
the actual runways, but they're where they put office buildings and things.
So they were pretty good sized farms then too, were they?
They were like under 50 acres, I think, something like that.
Bob, are you aware of other organic farms in northern Beaver County?
Not too much. I'm not sure. I haven't been to the farmers markets for a while, but there's one big organization over in south of Zillionople, farm, Kretschmann Farm, and they do what they call consumer, what do you call it? Where you sign up for you sign up to get a box of produce for the whole summer. And there's different size boxes you can get. And it's becoming one of the better ways to farm, because you have these people signed up, and you know how much you need to have every week, and you have a market for it. And usually you get a pretty good price for it.
So you think that organic farming is catching on more so in this area?
Somewhat. I wouldn't say it's big yet. One thing that has happened, I don't know so much around here, but I know in some other areas where, since the government took over the certification, we started to be certified when the government wasn't involved at all. But then in the very late 90s, the federal government got involved, and it got more complicated and much more costly. So in many cases now, small farmers have formed an organization where they sort of certify each other and look over each other's techniques and critique each other, and they can do it for a lot less money.
I see.
Because right now, if you want to get federally certified, the cost starts at $1,000 and goes up from there every year. You can easily go more, and now too, if you're selling to stores, sometimes you even need to get a separate safety certification. You've heard of the problems with lettuce and spinach sometimes, and so that's a separate certification you sometimes need. So it's gotten a little more complicated, so small farmers a lot of times go at it a little bit more different.
Now you said you sold down in Ambridge and you sold at Beaver markets. Does price play a big part in whether you sell your product, or do you think people get what they pay for and so they're satisfied with paying a little bit more for your organic?
When we first started, we pretty much had to keep the price somewhat in line with what everybody else was charging, especially since back in the 80s, organic wasn't nearly that popular yet. So, price can play a role, but when they find out you have something really good, they will pay a little bit more. Like, I know we weren't big in potatoes, but we sometimes sold potatoes, and we had customers tell us that when they made a certain recipe or something using our potatoes, it seemed to taste better.
So taste.
So that would bring them back.
Yes,
and of
bringing
course,
them back.
Taste. We sold our watermelon for pretty reasonable. We were able to get a reasonable price out of them, and that was because I think they knew that the flavor was there, and we always guaranteed it 100%. If anybody who came back and told us they got a bad watermelon, we always gave them another one.
Is that right?
Yeah.
Well, there you were. So, and that's what it's all about, keeping the customer satisfied.
Yeah.
Yes. Do you believe that the organic farming might be on the rise in the local area here or throughout the United States? Do you think it'll catch on? Because I know when I was raised, we had our own small farming, and so everything that was in our gardens it wasn't sprayed. We picked the potato bugs off, and
Yeah.
we picked anything, to keep the crop healthy, and we manured our fields.
Yeah.
But with organic farming now, do you think it's going to catch on more so with the way
I think
things are nowadays?
I think it definitely is. The organic farming has expanded a lot in the whole country, and there's a big activity up in Clarion County. Like when we quit, when we retired and stopped selling to Whole Foods, a Amish group up in Clarion County stepped in and took the part that we were doing at the Whole Foods. And they have their own co-op up there where several families work together. And they can send a truck to Pittsburgh and other places. And they're pretty large scale, but again, it's a group of smaller farmers. And they've pretty much taken over the market, I think, in Pittsburgh as far as the stores.
Is that right? Okay. Okay, so you see that organic farming is taking a hold and probably going to be around for a while then.
Oh yeah, and there's more and more, like in the big areas of California, there's a lot of acreage that has gone organic and is still being converted. And in the Midwest, some of the grain farms have gone organic, and some, they call it ecological. They can use a little mixture of maybe some chemical fertilizers and some organic fertilizers and not use the sprays. And some of their grain then is bought by the companies that make cereal, and the cereal companies want good quality grain, and they're paid by what the grain weighs. And if you feed the grain minerals in your soil, the grain will weigh more and will have a good flavor and will last better in storage. And possibly if you're making a flour out of it, the flour will perform better if it has the minerals in it. That's becoming a big thing there. There's people who raise 1,000 acres or more in the Midwest of organic corn and wheat. So there's a demand for it. And right now there's not enough organic chicken feed being grown in the United States. Actually, a lot of it's imported.
Is that right?
I'm not even sure where it all comes from, but it's definitely a problem sometimes to get the organic feed that you need for animals. So the farmers that can grow their own are way ahead.
So you have better soil here to grow your plants, and then you don't use the pesticides, only the natural ones.
Yeah. Another one pesticide that is pretty commonly used is called pyrethrum. And it's made actually from flowers. And it will knock, it's not quite as powerful as some of the regular chemical pesticides, but it can usually do a pretty good job.
I see.
We don't find that we need it that much, except maybe on something like cantaloupe. We never did grow too much cantaloupe. That is one crop that is somewhat difficult.
So what crops did you grow besides cantaloupe and watermelon and cabbage?
The two biggest crops were the watermelon and winter squash.
Oh.
We grew, I don't know, maybe 10 different kinds of winter squash. I know Whole Foods sold a lot of winter squash. Mostly the big market was in the fall, between September and Christmas. At New Year's, it seems like there's a huge market for butternut squash. A lot of people make soups and different things out of butternut. I know.
Probably make pie out of that.
Pie,
couldn't you?
yeah. Most of the canned pumpkin you buy, if you look on the can, it'll say butternut.
Instead of pumpkin, it says
Yeah.
butternut.
Yeah.
That's interesting. I'll have to look at some of our cans in the store then and see what it says.
Yeah, it makes at least as good a pie, or probably better pie than pumpkin.
Does it really? Well, I'll have to keep that in mind. My goodness, my goodness. Okay, well then how do you store it, like your vegetables and things that you don't sell? Do you have a storage area in which to store?
Well, the winter squash, we would have it sold by the end of the year. By Christmas it would be sold. And during the fall, we actually stored it in the greenhouse.
In the greenhouse? And that and it wouldn't freeze?
Yeah, well, if we needed it, we had the furnace on.
Yeah, okay.
But yeah, it can take cool temperatures. But I know the Amish actually store ice in the winter, and then they bring it out they have a big insulated ice house where they can store the greens and things. We were never too much into greens. There's a really good, sometimes high-priced market for greens. But it needs so much labor. Greens are very labor intensive, and we didn't have much labor. We had one person who worked for us, and sometimes a few teenagers here and there, but we were always lacking labor.
Why should people in our local area want to care about small farms and small farmers and see that they succeed? Do you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, well, if we keep some farmers on the farm, it means less land will get developed. We'll have more trees, more fields, and it'll keep our whole watershed will be in much better shape than just having developments everywhere. And it'll mean that the local people here can go to the farmers markets and get fresh food. It's, if you look at in the supermarket now, more and more of it's coming from Mexico.
It is, you're right. It certainly is.
Also coming from a lot of greenhouses in Canada.
So buy local, and the nutrition is there,
yeah,
and you're supporting the small farmer.
Yeah, and you're keeping the land open to be a nicer place to live for Beaver County. I was going to get my broken down greenhouse. The wet snow broke down the end of the greenhouse.
As the snow broke it down. I see your rhubarb's coming.
Yeah.
You've got rhubarb there. Yes. So you've got onions planted out here now. And what else are you going to put into the garden this year?
Oh, we'll have a little bit of lettuce. There's some strawberries right here.
Strawberries are coming up.
And there's a row of asparagus. We had one cutting so far. It's just barely coming up. I hear there's none right here. I think over in the end there might be a few. It's been too cold at night for.
It's been too cold.
Yeah.
It's been too cold.
There's a stalk right here.
Oh, what's this here?
Yeah, right there.
Oh, asparagus. Yes, yes, I see it.
You can see the onion plants there.
Oh yes, yes, yes. Now, is this what you said, that machine would mound it like that?
Yeah.
And then what does it do? It plants it.
We plant by hand now.
The watering.
It has there's a little hole on this one every 4 inches.
Every 4 inches. Okay.
And within a few hours you can wet the soil underneath the plastic.
Now, does it get real hot, or the plastic actually keeps it moist underneath there?
Yeah.
So it's not, I'm thinking like something black would absorb the sun's heat and it would dry it out, but actually it stays nice and moist under there.
Yeah, it stays pretty moist.
Okay.
And we also use, in between, we use straw and newspaper.
Oh, newspaper? Straw and newspaper too. I see, are these your tomato cages here?
Yeah.
Okay.
We use some cages, and we use posts. Let's see, we usually use the 6-foot steel posts.
6-foot steel, okay.
And we put the posts would be about 4 feet apart, and we plant 2 tomato plants in between each post, and then we run a special string from post to post, and we run a string on each side of the post.
I see.
So that you'll have string that's only that far apart, and you keep adding strings as the tomatoes grow. So you have these strings on each side of the tomato plant.
And that supports it.
Yeah, and that's the way a lot of the commercial tomatoes are grown now.
Okay.
Hardly anybody grows tomatoes on the ground anymore.
Because they just rot sometimes on the ground. So that makes sense.
Yeah.
That makes sense.
You get a lot more disease on the ground.
Yes. That black spot that comes on the bottom of them.
And just all kinds of
it's just not
disease.
Not good. Okay. Oh yeah. So now how far, about 2 inches apart you plant them?
Oh, it depends on what type of onion.
No,
Some of them I'm going to start planting, I'll put almost 4 inches apart.
Okay.
Because we have one type of sweet onion. We order these plants from Texas. And this is a regular onion here, but we have a sweet onion I'm going to plant. It's called sweet apple. And it can get 4 to 5 inches in diameter.
Is that right? Well,
They're
that's
just beautiful
pretty good.
things.
That's pretty good size,
Yeah,
sweet
and
apple. Are they white?
Yeah,
They're
yellow white.
Yellow white?
Yeah.
Oh, I see this. I'm familiar with this tool. I am familiar with this tool.
Yeah.
Yes, that's something that you use?
I just use it to open up the row to put the onions in.
Put the onions in. Yes.
And then we'll have some beans growing, and then the other side of the garden, the upper side of the garden this year will be corn. We usually plant maybe 3 kinds of corn all on different days, so that when you can make one planting and have it come in 3 different times.
Right.
And then you can sometimes I make a planting as late as early July. Yeah, the corn was down here, but actually it was right here last year.
Yes. Okay, so now your corn's going to be up there this year. Okay, and I see something has walked through here. I see little footprints through here. So something has come, maybe it was a deer.
Maybe a deer, yeah.
Yes, already checking out your garden.
Yep. And you'll see stalks of, looks like dead grass or something.
Yes, I do.
That was the winter cover crop. That was rye grain. We plant rye grain in the fall. It can be planted pretty late and still come up after you take the crops off. I mean, I've planted rye as late as early November, and it still came up, and you had something to till in the spring.
So this is nourishing the soil.
And rye grain also has a little bit of an anti-weed property. It actually helps a little bit to keep the weeds down.
Keep the weeds down. Oh, that's the type of crop to plant, isn't it? To keep those weeds down. And these are some of your stakes that you use for
different things.
Different things.
Yeah, they're not quite long enough for tomatoes.
I was just going to say, I thought maybe they might be tomato stakes, but they're not long enough. Okay.